A simple wedding is winding down under the warm Galilean sun. The music has slowed. Laughter still floats between the tables. But in the back corner, the servants are whispering. The wine is gone. Not a single drop left. And in a culture where running out of wine at a wedding was a deep shame that could follow the bride and groom for years, this moment feels like disaster. You can picture Mary, Jesus' mother, watching her son. She has known him for 30 years. She remembers the angel's visit, the stable, the strange prophecies. And now she turns to him with quiet confidence and says simply, "They have no wine." Jesus looks at her. "Woman, what does this have to do with me? My hour has not yet come." But Mary tells the servants anyway, "Do whatever he tells you." 6 stone water jars stand nearby, each holding 20 to 30 gallons. Jesus says, "Fill them with water." They do. Then he says, "Now draw some out and take it to the master of the feast." The master tastes it. His eyes widen. This is not ordinary wine. This is the best wine he has ever had. And it has come at the very end, when everyone expected the worst. This was the first of the signs. John calls it a Samayan. Not just a miracle. A sign. A pointer. Pointing straight to who this man really is. Here's what most people miss. Jesus didn't have to do this. He could have let the party end quietly. But he stepped in. Quietly. Powerfully. Turning ordinary water into extraordinary joy. And this is where the journey begins. Because that same Jesus is still in the business of turning lack into abundance. Emptiness into fullness. Ordinary moments into encounters you will never forget. But it gets stranger. You are about to walk with me through every major miracle Jesus performed, in the order they happened. Not as a random list of wonders. This is not a story about magic tricks. This is not a story about random healings. This is not a story about proving power. This is a story about the deliberate, escalating revelation of who Jesus really is. And what that means for every impossible situation you are facing right now. Stay with me, because the pattern that starts at this wedding will take us from a single jar of water all the way to an empty tomb. And somewhere along the way, you might discover that the Jesus who showed up in Cana is closer to your own story than you ever imagined. Word soon spreads from Cana. People start talking. A man who turns water into wine at a wedding? This is no ordinary teacher. Not long after, Jesus is back in Cana again. A royal official, a man with status and connections in the king's court, hears about him. His son is dying. The boy is burning with fever in Capernaum, miles away. The father doesn't waste time. He travels the long road himself, finds Jesus, and begs him, "Sir, come down before my child dies." You can feel the desperation in his voice. This is a father facing the worst fear any parent can know. He has tried everything else. Now he stands before this Galilean preacher with nothing left but hope. Jesus looks at him and says something surprising. "Unless you see signs and wonders, you will not believe." The official doesn't argue. He simply pleads again, "Sir, come down before my child dies." Then Jesus speaks the words that change everything. "Go. Your son lives." The man believes the word Jesus spoke and starts the journey home. While he is still on the road, his servants meet him with the news. "Your son is alive. The fever left him yesterday at the 7th hour." The exact moment Jesus had spoken, that father and his whole household believed. One word from Jesus crossed miles and defeated death's approach. But it gets stranger still. Jesus moves on to Capernaum, a fishing town on the shore of the Sea of Galilee. On the Sabbath, he enters the synagogue. A man is there, tormented by an unclean spirit. The demon cries out loud in front of everyone, "What do you want with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God." The whole room freezes. Jesus speaks with calm authority. "Be quiet. Come out of him." The demon throws the man down, but leaves without harming him. The people are amazed. What is this? A new teaching with authority. He even commands evil spirits, and they obey him. Later that same day, Jesus goes to Simon Peter's house. Peter's mother-in-law is lying in bed with a high fever. They tell Jesus about her. He goes to her side, takes her hand, and helps her up. The fever leaves instantly. She feels strength return to her body and immediately begins serving them, making dinner for the whole crowd that is gathered. By sunset, the whole town is at the door. People bring the sick and those troubled by demons. Jesus heals many, but he doesn't stay. Early the next morning, while it is still dark, he slips away to a lonely place to pray. The disciples hunt for him. When they find him, they say, "Everyone is looking for you." Jesus answers, "Let us go on to the next towns, for that is why I have come." And so the pattern continues. Word spreads throughout Galilee. Here's what most people miss about the pattern that is already beginning to form. Jesus is not just healing bodies. He is showing authority over sickness, over evil spirits, over distance, and even over time itself. Each miracle is a sign, a sign, pointing to something bigger. The same power that turned water into wine is now turning despair into joy, fear into faith, and death's shadow into life. And if you are watching closely, you can already see the stakes rising. What started at a wedding is moving into homes, into synagogues, into the private battles people fight when no one else is watching. Pay attention to this, because the Jesus who spoke one word across miles to a dying boy is the same Jesus who can speak one word into your situation right now, no matter how far away the answer feels. The crowds keep growing. Jesus is teaching by the lake again, and the people press in so close that he steps into Simon Peter's boat and asks him to push out a little from shore. When he finishes speaking, he turns to Peter and says, "Put out into deep water and let down the nets for a catch." Peter is tired. He and his partners have fished all night and caught nothing. But something in Jesus' voice makes him answer, "Master, we have worked hard all night and caught nothing. But because you say so, I will let down the nets." The nets go down, and then they fill. So many fish that the nets begin to break. The boats start to sink under the weight. Peter falls at Jesus' knees. "Go away from me, Lord. I am a sinful man." Jesus smiles and says, "Do not be afraid. From now on you will catch men." Peter, James, and John leave everything and follow him. But it gets stranger. Later, Jesus and the disciples are crossing the Sea of Galilee. A furious storm comes up. Waves crash over the boat. The experienced fishermen are terrified, convinced they are going to drown. Jesus is asleep in the stern, head on a cushion. They wake him, shouting, "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" Jesus stands up. He speaks to the wind and the waves. "Quiet. Be still." The wind dies down. The waves flatten. A great calm falls over the water. The disciples look at each other in awe. Who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him. Stay with me, because the pattern is becoming unmistakable. Jesus has power over creation itself. Not long after, they reach the other side, the region of the Gerasenes. A man meets them among the tombs. He is naked, violent, and uncontrollable. The locals have tried to chain him, but he breaks every chain. Night and day he screams and cuts himself with stones. His name? Legion, he says, because many demons are inside him. The man runs to Jesus and falls on his knees. The demons beg not to be tormented. Jesus commands them to come out. They enter a large herd of pigs feeding nearby. The pigs rush down the steep bank into the lake and drown. The man is sitting there now, clothed and in his right mind, talking calmly with Jesus. The people of the region are afraid and beg Jesus to leave. But the healed man wants to go with him. Jesus sends him home instead. "Go and tell them how much the Lord has done for you." Meanwhile, back on the other side, another desperate person pushes through the crowd. A woman who had been bleeding for 12 long years. She had spent everything on doctors and only grew worse. According to the law, she was unclean, unable to touch anyone. But she reaches out in the crowd and touches the edge of Jesus' cloak. Immediately, her bleeding stops. She feels it in her body. Jesus stops. "Who touched me?" The disciples are confused by the pressing crowd, but Jesus knows power has gone out from him. The woman falls at his feet, trembling, and tells the whole truth. "Daughter," he says gently, "your faith has healed you. Go in peace." Before she can even stand, messengers arrive from Jairus' house. Jairus is a synagogue ruler whose 12-year-old daughter is dying. He had begged Jesus to come. Now the message is heartbreaking. "Your daughter is dead. Don't bother the teacher anymore." Jesus overhears and says to Jairus, "Don't be afraid. Just believe." They continue to the house. Inside, people are wailing. Jesus says, "She is not dead. She is only asleep." They laugh at him. He takes the girl's hand and says, "Talitha koum," which means, "Little girl, I say to you, get up." She stands up at once and begins to walk around. The parents are overcome with joy. Jesus tells them to give her something to eat. Here's what most people miss in this cluster of miracles. Jesus is showing authority over nature, over demons, over chronic illness that no doctor could touch, and even over death itself. The stakes keep rising. What began with wine at a wedding has now reached into the darkest places: tombs, bleeding bodies, and a child's deathbed. Pay attention to this. The same voice that calmed the storm can speak peace into your chaos. The same power that set Legion free can break what has bound you for years. And the same hand that took a dead girl by the hand can reach into the places in your life that feel beyond hope. The crowds have grown massive now. Thousands follow Jesus wherever he goes. One afternoon on a grassy hillside near the Sea of Galilee, more than 5,000 men, plus women and children, have been listening to him all day. The sun is beginning to set. The disciples come to Jesus and say, "This is a remote place, and it's already getting late. Send the people away so they can go to the villages and buy themselves some food." Jesus looks at them calmly. "You give them something to eat." They are stunned. Andrew speaks up. "Here is a boy with 5 small barley loaves and 2 small fish. But how far will they go among so many?" Jesus has the people sit down in groups on the green grass. He takes the 5 loaves and 2 fish, looks up to heaven, gives thanks, and breaks them. Then he gives the pieces to the disciples, and the disciples give them to the people. Everyone eats and is satisfied. When the scraps are collected, there are 12 full baskets left over, one for each disciple. This was no small miracle. 5,000 men, plus families, fed with a boy's lunch. And the leftovers prove it was no illusion. But it gets stranger. That same evening, Jesus sends the disciples ahead by boat to the other side of the lake, while he dismisses the crowd and goes up on a mountainside to pray alone. By the 4th watch of the night, between 3 and 6 in the morning, the boat is in the middle of the lake, battered by waves and a strong headwind. The disciples are exhausted and afraid. Then they see something walking on the water toward them. They cry out in terror, "It's a ghost." Jesus immediately says to them, "Take courage. It is I. Don't be afraid." Peter answers, "Lord, if it's you, tell me to come to you on the water." "Come," Jesus says. Peter steps out of the boat and walks on the water toward Jesus. But when he sees the wind, he is afraid and begins to sink. "Lord, save me," he cries. Jesus reaches out his hand and catches him. "You of little faith," he says, "why did you doubt?" And when they climb into the boat, the wind dies down. Those in the boat worship him, saying, "Truly you are the Son of God." Here's what most people miss in these 2 miracles back to back. First, Jesus multiplies what little is offered to him. Then he invites Peter to walk where only God should be able to walk, on the water. The pattern is clear. Jesus has authority over provision and over the very laws of nature. He is not just a healer anymore. He is revealing himself as the one who sustains creation and invites ordinary people like Peter, and like you, to step out in faith. Now watch what happens next. Jesus continues his ministry with growing intensity. He heals a man born blind by making mud with his saliva, spreading it on the man's eyes, and sending him to wash in the pool of Siloam. The man comes back seeing. The religious leaders investigate, question the man's parents, and finally throw the healed man out of the synagogue. Jesus finds him and asks, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" The man says, "Lord, I believe," and worships him. The opposition is rising. The miracles are getting bolder. The stakes are climbing towards something even greater. Pay attention to this. The Jesus who fed thousands with almost nothing is the same Jesus who can take the little you have, your time, your faith, your broken pieces, and multiply it beyond what you can imagine. The Jesus who called Peter out onto the waves is the same one calling you to trust him when everything around you feels unstable. And the Jesus who opened blind eyes is still opening eyes today, even when religious systems try to shut them again. The opposition has reached a boiling point. The religious leaders have had enough. After Jesus raises a man from the dead in Bethany, a man named Lazarus who had been in the tomb 4 days, they decide that this man must die. You remember the open loop we planted at the beginning? That simple wedding in Cana where Jesus turned water into wine. That was the first sign, a quiet miracle of joy and abundance. But now we reach the greater transformation he was pointing toward all along. Lazarus is dead. His sisters Mary and Martha are heartbroken. Martha runs to meet Jesus and says, "Lord, If you had been here, my brother would not have died. Jesus answers, your brother will rise again. Martha thinks he is talking about the resurrection at the last day. But Jesus says something that stops time. I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live, even though they die. Then he asks, where have you laid him? They take him to the tomb, a cave with a stone rolled across the entrance. Jesus weeps. The crowd sees his tears and says, see how he loved him. Then Jesus prays out loud so everyone can hear. Father, I thank you that you have heard me. And then, in a loud voice, he calls, Lazarus, come out. The dead man walks out, still wrapped in grave clothes. Take off the grave clothes and let him go, Jesus says. And Lazarus is alive, fully alive, 4 days dead, and now breathing, talking, hugging his sisters. This is the moment the open loop closes. What began with water becoming wine has reached its full revelation. Jesus has power not just over wine, not just over sickness, not just over storms and demons. He has power over death itself. The greatest miracle, the sign that points most clearly to who he really is. But the story does not end in celebration. The religious leaders see this miracle and instead of believing, they plot to kill him. If we let him go on like this, they say, everyone will believe in him, and then the Romans will come and take away both our temple and our nation. Jesus knows what is coming. He sets his face toward Jerusalem. On the way, he curses a fig tree that has leaves but no fruit, a living picture of a nation that looks religious but produces nothing. The tree withers from the roots up. Another sign, another warning. Then comes the week we call Holy Week. Jesus enters Jerusalem on a donkey while crowds shout, Hosanna! He cleanses the temple again. He teaches in parables that cut to the heart. He shares a final Passover meal with his disciples, washing their feet, giving them bread and wine as signs of his body and blood. This is my body given for you. This cup is the new covenant in my blood. In the Garden of Gethsemane, he prays in agony. Soldiers arrest him. Peter denies him 3 times. The religious leaders condemn him. Pilate washes his hands. Roman soldiers nail him to a cross between 2 criminals. The sky goes dark. The earth shakes. The curtain in the temple tears from top to bottom. Jesus cries out, it is finished. And he dies. But the greatest miracle is still to come. On the 3rd day, the tomb is empty. Angels appear. Jesus appears to Mary Magdalene in the garden, to the disciples in the upper room, to doubting Thomas who touches the wounds, to 7 disciples by the Sea of Galilee, where he cooks them breakfast and restores Peter. 40 days later, he ascends into heaven while they watch, and angels promise he will return the same way. The open loop is fully resolved. The Jesus who turned water into wine at a wedding is the same Jesus who called a dead man out of a tomb, who conquered death on the cross, and who rose again so that everyone who believes in him might have life. Real life, eternal life, life that even death cannot touch. For 2,000 years, people have tried to explain away the miracles of Jesus. They call them legends. They call them exaggerations. They call them impossible. But the pattern is too consistent, the witnesses too many, the transformation too real. These were not tricks. These were signs, semia, pointing to the truth that the God who made the universe stepped into it in the person of Jesus. Here are the 3 things I want you to carry with you from this journey. First, the miracles of Jesus form a clear and intentional progression. They are not random acts of power. They begin with joy at a wedding and end with victory over death itself. Each one reveals a little more of who he is, until the final sign, the empty tomb, leaves no doubt. He is the resurrection and the life. Second, the same Jesus who performed every miracle in this video is still at work today. The power that turned water into wine, that calmed storms, that raised Lazarus, that conquered the grave, that power has not diminished. He is still the one who can take what is broken in your life and make it whole. He is still the one who can speak peace into your chaos and life into your dead places. And third, the most important of all, even when it looks like it is too late, even when the stone has been rolled across the tomb and the tears have been flowing for days, Jesus is still the one who calls dead things back to life. Your situation is not beyond him. Your grief is not too deep for him. Your hope is not gone. Because the Jesus of every miracle in this story is alive right now, and he is inviting you to believe. Which miracle in this journey hit you the hardest, and why? Tell me in the comments below. I read every single one. If this message encouraged you, if it gave you hope, if it helped you see Jesus more clearly, then do one thing right now. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss another deep dive into Scripture. And share this video with someone who needs to hear that their story is not over. Because the same voice that spoke to Mary at Cana, to Peter on the water, to Lazarus in the tomb, and to the women at the empty grave is still speaking today. And he is still saying the same two words he has always said to terrified people. Fear not.